Alright, so me and my wife were just talking, and we were just discussing one of the classic little slogans of these apostate Christians, and something you'll always hear them say when you're telling these apostate Christians to keep the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is part of the Holy Covenant and we're supposed to keep the Holy Covenant, is that, oh well, Jesus broke the Sabbath. And something my wife said, I was like, wow, that is exactly right. So the Christian doctrine as to why we don't have to keep the Holy Covenant, the Ten Commandments, is, oh no, we don't have to keep it, or we can't keep it. That's why Jesus had to come along and keep it perfectly, so we don't have to. Well, that's a massive contradiction, because if he kept the law perfectly, then he wouldn't have broken the Sabbath. Because if he broke the Sabbath, he would be a transgressor, and so that entire doctrine that the Christians have of, well, Jesus kept the Ten Commandments perfectly so we don't have to, goes out the window. Now, I know what you Christians are going to say. You're going to say, oh, well, it's not that he broke the Sabbath, it's that he changed the Sabbath. He became the Sabbath. Well, that's not anywhere in Scripture either. Hebrews 4, the Scripture that you rely on to back up that doctrine, literally says that God rested on the seventh day, and in this place again, if we, his people, will enter into that rest. He rested on the seventh day, and in this place again. That means it is still on the seventh day. So, what happened when Yeshua broke the Sabbath? He didn't break it. He was teaching us the key of David in this section of Scripture. And in this section of Scripture, what he's doing is showing us that, he's showing us this thing called the key of David, which is basically a spiritual blessing given to the servants of God. And what it allows them to do is profane the Sabbath, but remain blameless. And that's why he says that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath day. He's telling us that he has the authority, and this is because of, I think it's Numbers 30, you see this scripture? He has the authority to give us the ability to profane the Sabbath, but remain blameless. Okay, because he holds the key of David, and he gives the key of David to his servants. And what the key of David is, in a nutshell, is a 3-day sexual fast. That's why in Matthew 12, when the Pharisees accused him of breaking the Sabbath again, he said, go and learn what David did when he profaned the Sabbath but remained blameless, when he ate the shewbread that was only supposed to be eaten by the priests. And the only reason the priests could eat it was because they themselves had kept themselves from women those 3 days. So when David asks for some of the bread, the priests say, well, you can't unless you've kept yourself from women these 3 days. And David says, I have done that. So then the priests say, okay, well, you can take it. And this is because of, it's called the key of David, not because David did it first. Because I know what all of you will say. You'll say, well, hold on, because I've got to explain this. The reason why it's called the key of David is because David knew the law better than his teachers. And so David knew that there was this clause in the law in Exodus 19 where God specifically told Israel, or he told Moses, to get the people of Israel to sanctify themselves by not having sex with their wives 3 days running up to the Sabbath, and on the Sabbath day God would descend on Mount Sinai, and that's where he wrote the covenant in 2 tables of stone. So David knew about this law. David knew about this clause in the law. That's why it's called the key of David. It's not because David did this 3-day sexual fast first. It's because he knew that this 3-day sexual fast was in the law, and that if he did it, it would allow him to profane the Sabbath but remain blameless. So, of course, Yeshua understood this, and he even said to the Pharisees, if you had learnt what this means, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, you wouldn't have condemned the guiltless. Well, the key of David is only given to the servants of God. And the servants of God know very well what it means, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, because that's the gospel. Okay, so these Pharisees, they didn't understand the gospel. They didn't understand that God preferred mercy and not sacrifice, and that's why they were so focused on the sacrificial law rather than the law of liberty, which is to love your neighbour as yourself. So they were never going to receive the key of David. And then, coming full circle, the modern day Pharisees, it's not the people teaching to keep the Holy Covenant and to love their neighbour as themselves. That's the opposite of what the Pharisees were doing. The modern day Pharisees are the Christians who teach for doctrines the traditions of men, laying aside the commandments of God. So the modern day Christians, they falsely accuse the Messiah of breaking the Sabbath, just like the Pharisees falsely accused him, except there's a bit of a twist, because the Pharisees were falsely accusing Yeshua of breaking the Sabbath, and they were pissed off about it. But the Christians, they falsely accuse the Messiah of breaking the Sabbath, but they use that as their justification for themselves to break the Sabbath. It's just wicked. It's so wicked.
The left and the right.
Yeah, but because you people cannot understand mercy and not sacrifice, you'll never understand the gospel, so you'll never understand the key of David, so you're going to continue, whether you know it or not, you're going to continue to falsely accuse the Son of God of breaking the Holy Covenant. Like, my goodness, the hot coals that you are heaping on your head with that false accusation actually, makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
It's horrific. Like, the Messiah that came to teach the Holy Covenant and remember the Holy Covenant, Deuteronomy 18, Luke 1:72, you're falsely accusing him of breaking that covenant. Oof. So I thought I was done with the video, but then we started talking about what I was just talking about in the video, and then there's just more to add. So in John 5:42 and 43, the Messiah, talking to the Pharisees, says that I know that you have not the love of God in you, and the love of God is keeping his 10 commandments, Deuteronomy 6, 1-5. So he says, I know that you have not the love of God in you, and because of this, I come in my Father's name, Jehovah, the Son is Yeshua, means Yah is salvation, and you receive me not. But another will come in his own name, and him you will receive, Jesus Christ, the lawless one. Like, a fundamental part of your doctrine of Jesus is that he broke the Sabbath. That makes him the lawless one. How do you people not hear it? That you really are deaf of hearing. You're deaf, dumb, and blind. You're saying, let me just say it again so it really sinks in. You are saying, in the same breath, that the Messiah kept the law perfectly so you don't have to, but he broke the Sabbath so you don't have to keep the Sabbath.
Listen.
You must hear how, that, if you went into a dictionary and searched the word contradiction, and if that was the example that they gave, it would be perfect.
Yeah.
You people are actually nuts. You've lost it. You have lost the ability to critically think.
Yeah.
You aren't thinking.